Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I am Ginny Dietrich.
And Ginny, I'm thinking way back, decades now, to why I started my agency.
Oh,
And I
decades,
can't
huh?
remember because I'm too old now, so no.
You can too remember.
Well, I mean, the honest answer is that I started my first agency was because I was unemployed, and it was better to describe myself as a consultant than unemployed.
Yeah, sure.
And then accidentally started accumulating business.
Yeah.
But I do think it is a helpful exercise for us to go back and think about why we started the businesses, or maybe not. In some cases like mine, because I was unemployed, is not the greatest explanation. So, more why did I decide to build it into an actual business?
Why to keep going. Yeah. I think that's good, especially as we're thinking about starting out the new year and remind ourselves, of the reasons that we started this. Some of us do it because we're unemployed. Some of us did it because we found we think we had a better way of doing things. Some of us did it because we have a problem with authority. Some of us did it because we'd make terrible employees. I mean, there are lots of different reasons, but I think reaching back into our archives in our brains and thinking about why we did it, or I think that you're right, why we continue to do it is a really good exercise.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said over and over again over the years that I think too many agencies operate on inertia, as opposed to any kind of a fundamental strategy. And so, it's very easy to say, as I'm sure many people ask you as they do me, well, what's my next step? Here's where my agency is now. What should I do next? And the answer is very different depending on what you're trying to accomplish with the business. So, trying to think back to those early days and what motivated you to start the business, evaluate it, because that may have changed, right? You may have started it because it served a particular need in the moment, and maybe it's different today. But thinking about that and thinking about what you really want from the business is usually a better way to come up with strategic decisions than it is to say, well, what do other agencies like mine do when they get to this stage of growth or to this challenge? You really need to match it up, because otherwise, what's the point of taking on all of that risk and stress of being a business owner?
Yeah, I mean, a really good example of that is I really thought I wanted to build a great big agency with hundreds of employees and clients around the globe and all of the things. And as I started to grow and we got to about 30-ish, 33, 32 people, I realized that's not what I want to do.
Right.
It was not enjoyable. I had built a company that I was not thriving in, that I didn't enjoy leading. I was dealing mostly with HR issues and not doing the work. And so the Great Recession did afford me the opportunity, unfortunately and fortunately, to kind of take a step back and think about what kind of business do I want to have and what kind of business do I want to lead. And while we're back up to that same size, it's a different structured business that allows me to focus in on the things that I do best and do the things that I enjoy versus HR, because that is not something I enjoy at all.
I think I've yet to meet an owner who
No,
enjoys
it's not
doing
fun.
HR or
It's not fun.
accounting
Nope,
or those
not
sorts
fun.
of things.
Not
There
fun.
are some who do it well, but don't enjoy it. But
Right.
I don't think I've found any that actually enjoy doing it. So, but I think that, as you think back to those early days and you think about what motivated you, it can often help you to figure out, what is that spark that you need in the business for you to either continue enjoying it for a longer period of time, or bring back some of that joy that you had in those early days. Because I know a lot of agency owners these days are frustrated and trying to figure out how to change things for the better. And I think part of the way you inform yourself of that is by thinking back to those early motivations and figuring out how you can inject more of that into your business today.
Yeah, I think it's really important to do that. And I think for me personally, I get really passionate and enjoy my job when I'm learning and doing new things. So artificial intelligence, of course, has been a great big thing for me because I've really enjoyed learning it and understanding it and implementing it into my business and then taking it to clients. Last month we launched the Peso operating system AI edition, where the AI prompts you instead of you prompting it. So it will say, what are your business objectives? What are you trying to achieve? What are your audiences? What are your messaging? And then it builds a Peso program for you that's fully integrated versus you saying, I need you to act like a marketing director who understands peso and can build this and this. It's that. So I like those are the kinds of things that really get me excited, and building those kinds of things gets me excited and motivated. So it's easy because I understand that about myself. It drives my team crazy because they're like, "Oh, she's got something new," or their favorite
Right.
thing is, "I had an idea," and they're like, "Oh no."
No,
But
not again.
that's what keeps me motivated. So finding a way to understand what brings you joy in the business, I think, is incredibly important, so that without exhausting your team, of course, but doing it in a way that keeps you motivated and not burned out.
Yeah, one of the things that always used to drive my teams nuts was I would say, over the weekend I was playing with this new thing. And you could just see the looks on their faces and like, oh,
Yep.
this is a lot more work for me
This
now.
is gonna be fun. Yep.
Yes, this is, yeah, yeah. They never seemed to appreciate it the way that I had hoped they would when I came to them with
Correct.
these
Yes.
brilliant brainstorms of mine.
Yes.
But and I think as founders of agencies, most of us come in with some sort of that idea that we want to be creative or strategic or those kinds of things. And as we end up in more of a management role, we have less and less opportunities to do it. So I think that rather than giving up on that dream, we need to figure out how we can sprinkle enough of that in there to keep ourselves motivated. We can't give up the management piece. We can't give up the business development piece. Many of us would like to, but the reality is that unless you've built a fairly large agency, you just don't have the
Right.
ability to pull yourself out of that as a
Right.
solo owner. And so, but it doesn't mean that you have to give up on those things entirely. You can carve out a piece of time to work on that. And if you are structuring your role in such a way that you're enjoying what you're doing, it also means that you're frankly less likely to be doing the bad things that founders of businesses can do, which is micromanagement and tinkering the things that you don't really belong in, because you're not occupying yourself with the things that really motivate you, and instead you're continuing to try to do every aspect of the business, and that's where you start to run into team morale problems quite often.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned over the years is that, yes, I can do the work. And yes, I can probably do it pretty well. But is it really something that I should be focused on? And if not, is it something that I can pay an expert to do? Because in the long run, it'll cost me less money, less time, less resources, all of the things. And I know as small agency owners, it's really hard to say, gosh, I'm going to have to spend $2,000 or $3,000 a month on an expert, when in fact it might save you, 15 or 20 grand on the back end. So I think you have to think about these things as investments in your business and investments in your time, so that you can focus on the things that you're great at, and the things that make you the happiest, and the things that are most motivating to you, because that's how your business will grow.
Absolutely. And if that happens to be being creative and strategic, then you shouldn't be doing it day to day in all likelihood for clients,
Sure.
but you should find ways to do it either as
Yes.
part of, quarterly or annual client reviews or
Yes.
internal brainstorming sessions that you're engaging in. There's a lot of things you can do behind the scenes to be useful and to exercise those muscles in a way that gives you satisfaction, but doesn't put you on the front line so that you're, now the one that the client decides they're going to call every time they've got an issue, because that ends up eating up a lot of your time in a way that probably you're not going to enjoy. So sometimes it's doing things behind the scenes that gets you the most value, or doing annual in person with the client, but they understand it's special that you're here.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
not
Yeah.
something they can or should expect every week.
Yeah. I know I've talked about this before on the podcast, but we do quarterly planning with our clients. We do a quarterly look back, and then we, say, okay, based on metrics and data and all that and your priorities, here's what we're suggesting for quarter two, or in the next quarter. And that has afforded many opportunities, for me to work in my where I'm strong, but it also almost always gets us more money. So when agency owners are like, oh, should I do a cost of living raise every year? Should I increase by 10 or 15% every year? That kind of goes away, because you're getting new projects every quarter based on the plan and the strategy and creativity that you're providing to the clients every quarter, because they're like, "Oh gosh, yeah, we should actually do that. And sometimes they'll say, "We don't have extra budget. Can we move some things around?" Which is okay. But most of the time they'll say, "We have a little extra budget. Let's focus on doing that. We have to launch a new website. Here's some extra budget for that. We have to do a series of webinars to maintain our CEUs. Here's a little extra budget for that." So there are things and opportunities for you to, for lack of a better term, upsell when you're doing these quarterly meetings versus waiting for the annual.
Yeah, and so finding a way to inject yourself in those things is a valuable exercise from
Absolutely.
that look back to the early days. But the other thing that can be helpful in looking back to the early days of your agency is what helped drive your early success. Because a lot of times when we're trying to find solutions to our current growth issues, we can find clues in some of those early days. And,
Hmm.
a lot of that, in the early days of most agencies, it may be that low hanging fruit from personal networks and things like that. But there are usually other patterns that you might be able to see there that might help you to understand what are the basics that you need to go back to. How do you employ some of those rather than focusing on all of the fancy new things that you see some genius podcast hosts talking about as far as how to grow an agency, and instead say, hey, this is what worked for me,
Yep.
because
Yep.
you may find something that works again today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we say this to clients all the time, but going back to the basics, it works, and it works for you too. So absolutely, you should think about those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't get here by accident. Well, maybe it was a little bit of an accident. Sometimes
Maybe,
that
yeah,
happens. But
some of it.
but if you've had any longevity at all, even a few years of longevity as an agency owner, there are patterns that you can find, usually that started in those early days, that you can lean into for understanding, and rather than trying to do something wild and different, focus on the things that you've proved can work for your business.
Yeah, one of the things, if I were to dig back into the archives, one of the things that worked extremely well for us is I had developed relationships with people who did business development at the large agencies. And what I found is that if they had an RFP or a current client or a prospect come in and say, we only have $250,000 to spend, they're not even going to look at that. And so they started just referring that business to us, which is how I grew the business.
Mhm.
So if I think about that now, how could we replicate that kind of, pipeline development? It was extremely effective. And I gift that to all the listeners too. Like, there are larger agencies in all of your cities that they have a certain threshold, and if something comes in below that, they are happy to refer business. So there is one way for you to start thinking about, how am I going to keep myself motivated? How am I going to keep my pipeline full? How am I going to keep cash coming in? That's one of the things that you can think about.
Yeah, and thinking those things through. I mean, sometimes it's not a one for one where you do it exactly the same way you did it
Sure.
originally, but you take that nugget of an idea, and things like finding other people who can refer you business is not quite a fit for them, but might be for you. It's a good reminder to be out there and having conversations with your peers, with
Yep.
people even that you might perceive sometimes as competitors, because there are often opportunities in the work that I do with agencies. It's not uncommon for some of the other consultants in the space to refer clients to me that are a better fit for my background and the
Absolutely.
kinds of
Yep.
agencies that I work
Yep.
with, and vice versa, because we all have our specialties. And as an agency, you have your specialties. So it is very common for many agencies to have grown this way. So certainly something to be looking at today, particularly if you're struggling to find that new business in 2026.
Yeah, I think I really love the advice of thinking back to how you got to where you are and some of the things that you did, and going back to basics a little bit, because those are the things that are going to continue to work. And to your point, maybe tweak a little bit to make them be more effective in 26.
I mean, it also puts you in the right mindset, I think, because if you're thinking back to those early stages, that tends to be when many agencies have the most growth, when things are most exciting. And so if you can try to bring back even a sprinkling of that, that can be really helpful, particularly when times are tougher, you're looking for the inspiration to take things to the next level, or whatever challenge you may be facing today, those lessons can be extremely valuable and also motivating at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I used to I used to get mad at companies that would hire big PR firms for like brand awareness and, sending news releases, and they didn't get any coverage. They didn't get any results. And I would get angry, and I would call the company and be like, "You're so stupid." I would never do that today, but I was just so naive and passionate about what we were doing that it didn't bother me to call and be like, "We can do this significantly better for you." And in some cases, they laughed and hung up on me. And in some cases, like, we became agency of record. Like, we took AOR away from Fleischman Hillard one year from a big, big company with a big, big company. And it was because I made a phone call where I was like, "I can't believe that you're spending this kind of money and getting these lackluster results." And they were like, "All right, let's listen." I don't think I would do that today, but it worked.
Right, but thinking back to those things can help you do two things. One is to think some of the positive things that you can do, or the affirmative
Right.
steps that you can take. But sometimes looking back to how you got started can also be reminders not to do certain things.
Sure.
So
Sure.
particularly if you've started an agency and maybe you worked at an agency previously, when you started, you probably had this laundry list of things. I would never do these things as an agency. And I think back to my first agency and some of the agencies that I had worked with previously, did a lot of what I felt was nickel and diming of you in terms of back in the day, charging you for faxes and photocopies
Sure.
and all
Yes.
sorts of little expenses. And so, I was committed back then to making sure that my invoices were always clean and simple and fixed. And I just worked in the cost of all of these things
Yep.
into my total cost of doing business so that I never had to aggravate a client. Fast forward to today, if I found myself doing that, I by looking back, I would say, wait a minute, let me think about that. Am
Mhm.
I being true to what my vision was of the business? And if not, is that because I've actually learned something and it does make sense to do what I thought was wrong back then? Because, you can learn and grow. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
Or have you just fallen into the trap because you walked around and you saw other people doing it? So you said, well, I'm going to start charging for faxes too. And if you're charging for faxes in 2026,
We
by
have
the
a
way,
problem, but
we have a huge problem because what the heck are you using that fax machine for, let alone that you're
Right.
charging for it? And by the way, where did you find a fax machine? Because I haven't seen a fax machine in person in a really long time, except maybe like at the back of a
The
doctor's
bank,
office,
the bank and the doctor's office. Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, I kind of haven't been inside a bank in a long time, but
Yeah.
everything's electronic now.
Yeah. There's no
But yeah,
need for that.
think back to those motivations that you may have had that rather than I want to do this, it was I never want to be the kind of agency that does this, because it is really so easy to fall down those rabbit holes over time without even realizing that you're doing the same things that you didn't ever want to see when you started your business.
Yeah. And I think it's so easy to sit on social media and you get served ads from experts who say this is the way that you should do things. And in some cases it might work. And in some cases you might be like, there is no way.
Right.
And I think it's really easy to listen to somebody and say, yeah, but we went from $3 million in debt to making $3 million a day, like, these wild claims. And then you kind of get sucked into that. I think if you're really true to who you are and what kind of agency you want to build, that's going to enable you to say, this just doesn't feel right to me. I'm just going to, great if he's really making $3 million a day. I need to just bypass this one.
Right, because you need to do what's right for you. And so
Right.
I think that the key to that is really going back to your roots, understanding what motivated you to get started, what drove that success in the early days. And by understanding the early months or years of your agency, the more that you can inform some of the decisions that you're making going forward, one way or the other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Think about
So
it. It's a good way to start 26.
nice positive way. We managed to get through an episode here without beating up on our listeners. We didn't start the year on a negative note. We
We
started
did not.
positive. Think about
We did.
what has worked for you previously
Yes.
and do more of that.
Do
So
more.
we will do more of this on a future episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. But in the meantime, I'm Chip Griffin,
I'm Jenny Dietrich.
and it depends.